Sonic hurt himself today to see if anyone cared because no one played his game. Everyone else was on Switch. It is a complete joke seeing how badly Sonic Racing Crossworlds has done because I knew it was going to be bad. I knew it was going to be embarrassing. I was the only person coming out saying that Sonic Racing is irrelevant, that it's closer to Garfield Kart than it is to Mario Kart, that it is basically a bunch of irrelevant video game mascots and outdated millennial brands like Hatsune Miku and Avatar: The Last Airbender trying to go up against the king of the kart racer, the inventor of the genre, Mario Kart. It was never going to be a thing. No one ever really wanted to see Sonic racing around in a car. It was always very silly. It was always very embarrassing. And now we kind of have a little bit of context as to what this is. And it really needs to be explored just what's happened here because you can see my last video talking about Mario Kart Sonic Racing Crossworlds and you can see just how much seething there was in the comment section about it, about how it was totally successful and how it was so much fun and how they were really enjoying it, which is why they were watching a video criticizing the game instead of playing it. Sonic Racing Crossworld had all this support online, and yet that didn't translate to actual success. It's already off of the Steam bestsellers list. It never cracked the Switch 2 list, and it is, by its nature, simply not going to do very well on PlayStation or Xbox. This game was a complete bomb and it will probably only break like a million units sold after selling used copies on at Black Friday for like $20 in like bargain bins and stuff like that. Like Sonic Racing Crossworlds, like all Sonic products, is a complete failure that only props itself up by Sega giving ludicrous sales a couple of weeks after release. You are going to see this game being sold for $20 to try and get those numbers up, to try and salvage this game's reputation, to try and get it on the same level as Mario Kart World. And it's just not going to happen. It is a complete and abject failure. And not only is it a failure, we are seeing more people start to acknowledge that Sonic is a dying brand. Outside of a handful of chronically online weirdos, like Chris Chan and his brethren, like Sonic has no audience. He is not a popular character. He is not a video game headliner. At this point, Kirby is bigger than he is. Like, what exactly makes Sonic relevant? And the answer is just pure nostalgia. Nostalgia from that time in your life when you could bully Nintendo fans, when you could harass them, when you could scream about them about blast processing, and then like cry for the teacher to come save you when you got beat up. Like that is the Sonic fan base, is that they are nostalgic for their peak of their lives. The elementary school. You know how like football people like peak in high school, like Sonic the Hedgehog fans peak in elementary school. Those guys never moved past this idea that owning a Sega Genesis made you cooler than people who own a Super Nintendo. And there's nothing like they don't actually play the Sega Genesis. They don't actually care about it. What actually matters is the status of it, the perceived status of owning a Sega Genesis, playing Sonic the Hedgehog, and being a more cool, mature kid than other kids on the playground. And it's that feeling of nostalgia, of just delusion, of just delayed adolescence that have just forced these people into the situation where they cannot accept that Mario Kart World was more successful than Sonic Racing Crossworlds. They can't even admit that Mario Kart World is a good game. honestly. Like they religiously fought against Mario Kart World tooth and nail. They hyped up Sonic Racing Crossworlds. The developers were in on it. They released all these ads, like, trying to condemn the game. People cheered, because they brought an ad back. Imagine getting hyped over a remake of an ad from the 90s. That's how like just insane these people are. Like I didn't sit here and say like oh, Paul Rudd came back for the Super Nintendo ad. Like nobody cares. Okay, nobody cares. But for the Sega audience, that was a massive deal. Sega was back. They were gonna stop Mario Kart, and it didn't go anywhere. Nobody talks about Sonic Racing Crossworlds. Nobody cares. Nobody plays it, and nobody bought the game. Like that's my big takeaway is that you couldn't even get the games in people's Switch 2s. Like nobody bought Sonic Racing Crossworld. You can look at the Switch 2 bestsellers list right now, and you'll see like Silk Song, you'll see Street Fighter 6, you'll see like FIFA, you'll see all these third-party games on the platform. No Sonic, at all. Sonic is a dead IP, completely dead, and propped up entirely by YouTubers screaming about how good Sonic was in the 90s. Pro tip, like the 90s was 30 years ago. Sonic was played out even back by 95. Okay, like Sonic peaked with like Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Actually, it peaked with Sonic 2, but like, that was its absolute peak. Sonic 2, a game that never even eclipsed Super Mario Bros. 3 in relevancy. Nobody ever thought that Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was better than Super Mario Bros. 3. And yet, like, for like ever since, Sonic fans have just been coasting off this idea that Sonic was this huge milestone video game property, one of the best in gaming, when it's not even a relevant mascot character today. Like when people think of blue hedgehogs, they think of Mabel from Animal Crossing. Nobody thinks of Sonic. Sonic doesn't even like excel at like being a blue hedgehog. He is an irrelevant video game mascot from the 90s that was never ever really able to compete with Mario. Forget competing with Mario Kart World. Sonic Racing Crossworlds will not be able to compete with Kirby Air Riders. Just like it wasn't able to compete with Diddy Kong Racing. Just like it wasn't able to compete with F-Zero, with vehicles that go way faster than Sonic can move. Like Sonic just isn't relevant enough to compete with Nintendo's critical franchises because people actually play and enjoy these games. Something that has never been true in Sonic's entire history. This is why I called Sonic an F tier franchise, because nobody actually plays Sonic. Nobody actually engages with Sonic media, watches the anime, or like, engages with like the merchandise or like spin-off material or comics or anything. Nobody cares about any of that. Like Sonic is relevant because he's Sonic and because he was a mascot character meant to compete with Mario. But the simple fact of the matter is, like, Sonic never grew out of that phase. Outside of this idea that he's Mario's rival, like, what did Sonic do to ever establish himself as a video game icon? In essence, like, Sonic is only relevant because of the marketing. He's all hype and no substance. He is the video game equivalent of Eminem. He is on the same level of quality as Michael Jackson or Taylor Swift. People who are propped up by an industry to sell you on something that doesn't really have any value to it at all. That just brainwashes you into obsessing about some fictional character for the rest of your life. That's Sonic the Hedgehog. Chris Chan wasn't autistic because of his love for Pokemon or because of his mental conditions or his aging parents. It's because he grew up obsessing over this blue rat. That's the reality, like the truth behind the legend of Christian is that it was entirely Sonic's fault, bro. Like, fuck the Sonichu demon. The Sonichu demon is just the spawn of the real problem, which is Sonic as a brand. And that is something that we really do need to talk about going forward, is that the Sonic brand and its fans are a problem.